fornication among you, and such fornication as is not so much as named among the Gentiles, that one should have his father's wife. Now, that would be adultery, because his father's wife is married to his father. So the specific type of fornication that he's talking about here is adultery, but he's just saying we don't want fornication of any stripe in the church whatsoever. Go over to verse 9, 1 Corinthians 5:9. I wrote unto you in an epistle not to company with fornicators, yet not altogether with the fornicators of this world, or with the covetous, or extortioners, or with idolaters, for then must ye needs go out of the world. But now I have written unto you not to keep company, if any man that is called a brother be a fornicator, or covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner, with such an one, no, not to eat. For what have I to do to judge them also that are without? Do not ye judge them that are within? But them that are without God judges. Therefore put away from among yourselves that wicked person. So Paul is writing to the church of Corinth. There is a very good chance that there is no pastor yet ordained over the church of Corinth. Corinth is a church plant that Paul has been working in, Apollos has been working in, Peter has come through and done some labor there, but it would seem that there's not yet a pastor ordained over this congregation. In any time, if you're in missions and you're planting a church, especially if you're doing it the way the apostles did it, with mobile missions, where you come in, you plant, you water, you move on, you come back, edify it some more. There's a season of time where that church is established, but it doesn't have a pastor yet. And I think some people, I think their church planting is injured, it's hurt, because they think that you can't have a church without a pastor. You can have a church without a pastor. A church is going to need a pastor, but just as when a pastor passes away or resigns or just moves to another church, that church doesn't cease to exist as a church because it suddenly doesn't have a pastor. By the same token, a church can come into existence before it has a pastor. It can be formed together by a church planter, by a missionary, by an apostle, and not yet have a pastor. The church in Corinth would seem to be in that condition here, and Paul is speaking to the church, and he's telling them as a church to put away from themselves that wicked person. It wouldn't matter if that person was a fornicator, or if they were covetous, or an idolater, or a railer, or a drunkard, or an extortioner. If any of those things, if you have that in your church, you're wrong. And as a church, you ought to get rid of that person in your company. And that's what he's saying here. Now, the one example, the actual real life example that we were given, was a man who was committing adultery with his father's wife. And they were just all fine with it. And so as you go through Scripture in the New Testament, as you go through the epistles, and you see the things that the Lord wants churches to know and learn, one of the things that constantly pops up is that he wants his body to be pure from fornication and several other things, but fornication is very, very common. And that includes adultery. And he's so hard on that a lot of times he will be somewhat redundant in that he'll say both fornication and adultery and uncleanness. And it's like, okay, he's really hammering this, because fornication is uncleanness. Adultery is fornication. But he's saying it in as many ways as possible because he really, really wants us to get it. That he does not want wickedness and lewdness in his churches. The idea of, you know what, we're just going to be real nice and we're going to let everybody come and we're all just going to company together, that does not please the Lord. And I think that would surprise a lot of pastors. I think that would surprise a lot of churches. It shouldn't surprise them if they're studying the Scriptures, because the Bible is quite clear about it, what he doesn't want in the church. But I believe what we have here in Revelation 2 with this pastor is, I think this pastor has misunderstood his job description, because he really is a good guy. Somebody that can be described as works and charity and service and faith and patience and works, with the last being more than the first, is a wonderful person. He's just not done the job that he was supposed to do as a pastor. And the consequences are horrific. I believe that a lot of pastors fail to maintain church discipline, fail to maintain purity in their church, whether it be the morals or the doctrine of the church, partly out of a kind heart, out of charity. I think that's what this guy has going on. He doesn't seem to be a rebel against God. And the fact that he's the only one that is commended for charity, I think, is a clue. I think that's supposed to let us know something about his motive. Why? Why did he mess up so badly as a pastor? Well, he's really nice, which can be a wonderful quality. But again, as we talked about, there's a difference in being nice and being kind. Just being a nice guy sometimes is the least kind thing you can do. And I think this pastor, very similar to the pastor of Pergamos, I think they may have had the concept that avoiding strife, avoiding drama, avoiding confrontation is just the right thing to do, that they're supposed to keep peace in the church. And so if I confront this woman, everybody related to her is going to be upset. Her best friend is going to be upset, and all of her best friend's family is going to be upset. I'm going to split the church if I point out why this woman is wrong, or if I tell her she needs to keep silence in the church. I mean, that's rude. So I think there are some pastors that their kindness and their charity is being used in the wrong way, and they think that they are sparing the flock by refusing to deal with head-on false doctrine and bad morals, because it's uncomfortable. If you've got in your church, you have people living in fornication in there, if you're a pastor, it ought to be because you have a shepherd's heart and you love people, that there ought to be something there. If you're someone who loves people and you care for them, it is gut-wrenching to have to call somebody in or to go and visit them and say, look, you're living in sin. Or do like Nathan did to David and say, thou art the man. That's not fun. That if somebody enjoys doing that, they've got a problem. If you just like getting in people's face and straightening them out, you've got a problem on the other side. But if you can't bring yourself to do it, and you feel like, I'm going to spare them, you've made a big mistake. Because these men, especially the pastor of Pergamos and the pastor of Thyatira, they didn't spare anybody. They put them in greater danger. Because now, instead of the pastor dealing with it, the Lord himself is going to come deal with it. With the sword that's coming out of his mouth, with his feet of brass and his eyes of fire. These people would have been far better off if this pastor had done his job. If he had told that woman to be quiet. But look at what would have been avoided if he had. This woman is going to lose her children. They're going to die. The men that she has committed fornication with are going to suffer, possibly die. This is clearly a big chunk of the church membership that has been infected by this. If the pastor had just been the gatekeeper like he was supposed to, as an angel of the church, if he had been a guardian like he should be as an angel, if he had given the right message and preached, like out of 1 Corinthians, to his people, and if he had preached like out of 1 Timothy to them and taught them that no, that is not what the women do in the church, and these things are not the things that anybody does in the church. We don't commit fornication. We don't eat things sacrificed to idols. That's not what we do here. And if you're going to be stubborn and you're going to preach it that that's what we do, or teach it as heresy,